unfair really, because I hit the first one heavy. I sort of chickened out and went for the C300 forged first because it's got the slightly larger profile head, and being the first swing, or the first ball that I've hit probably for about a fortnight, opted for that club. Bad choice. Actually hit the considerably smaller footprint of the FG Tour, struck that really quite nicely, and boy did that feel good. Reminiscent of the really small old school soft blades. Really like that. The first one, yeah, caught it a fraction heavy, but interested in walking down the golf balls here that I've hit. The one that I struck slightly heavy, what, 3 yards behind? Could have been something to do with the bounce maybe, I'm not sure. First impressions, not going to say too much about the C300 because I hit it a bit heavy, but FG Tour, nice. Now the FG Tour, the V6, I think is going to look better to people on the shelf. I can see a lot of people getting sort of moved and sucked over to that part of the shop to take a closer look. Now I'm talking about the FG Tour as though the C300 forged is somewhat the ugly duckling of the family, but it's not by any means. Again, it's just not as striking as the V6, but it is still a very good golf club. A few people on social media, when I've posted a few photographs, have suggested that it looks a little bit like a Callaway Apex, and I can certainly see where they're going with that. It does have a very similar aesthetic to that Callaway range. The more reviews I do for Wilson, the more backlash I'm going to get from the conspiracy theorists out there online, the golf conspiracy theorists, who are going to say that I'm being paid. I don't think I've ever hit 6 iron shots so straight in my life. This might be the secret. Forget having golf lessons and forget practice, just take up painting at home in an oversized shed and come out every fortnight and hit a few shots. Lower your handicap that way. But no, lovely. Again, I hit those two pretty much identically, I think, out the centre of the face. Ball flight wise, no apparent difference in height. Again, I think we're going to get more of an idea when we take these into a closed environment rather than being out on the golf course. It's difficult to judge how far they're going in height, etc. without a launch monitor. But to my eye, there didn't appear to be any real difference in height. And just looking down here on the fairway, well, you could throw a napkin over the two of them, and they're both in the middle. Have a little bit of a boast. Often the hit shots this good, but no difference in distance. To be fair, this fairway is reasonably bobbly, so we're not sure whether one of them hit an uphill or a downhill lie, but they've gone practically the same distance. Same ball flight. Again, I felt as though the C300 was a little bit softer off the face. Now, what this actually does to performance is anybody's guess. It's just a preference whether you like that feel off the head or not. In it feeling softer doesn't mean that it's going to be easier to work the ball and things like this. But no, again, very impressed. And here we are, they're in the middle of the fairway. Well, it was bound to happen at some point, wasn't it? Commentators cursing all that. First shot after I said I've hit them all straight right block with the C300. Nothing to do with the club, of course. That's everything to do with the way that I've delivered the golf club. FG Tour again, lovely and straight. Maybe a bit higher than what I was expecting, to be honest. Now they've got the tungsten weight in the bottom of the sole, and I guess they had to put something in there that's quite heavy because the cavity's quite big, so they've taken away a lot of material to displace it around the edge of the iron, and it's so very small that I'm sure that they'll have had to position some heavy material within that club head just to try and get the swing rate correct, because without it I think you barely even noticed that the club head was there. Even if we wake the day. So 2 more hits down the middle. This is getting boring now. Might as well just give me a staff player's contract and ship me out to the tour. But no, seriously, both down the dead centre again. That's more likely my delivery of the club. Very unlikely to do with the shaft or the head really. There's nothing that you can really do with technology to influence face-to-path relationship too much. The first one, again, the C300 forged, felt better. However, I did hit the V6 FG Tour just a little bit clean, a little bit off the bottom of the head, so I might have a little bit more backspin on that one. But certainly these little polymer cutaways that are in the C300 forged certainly seem to be doing the trick feel-wise. Distance-wise, in an environment like this out on the golf course, it would be difficult to say exactly how much influence they are having. If I get to keep these clubs long enough until I finish my sort of testing facility, teaching facility at home, until then, can't really determine too much about distance out here. But again, in the future, when I test them in a bit more of a closed environment, I'll have a better idea to see if the C300 does go that little bit further. Those last two shots really do highlight the human element when you're actually testing equipment. So I've been hitting it beautifully up until now. Those are the two worst shots I've hit by far. The first one, funny enough, with the FG2 V6 was a shank. The ball was below my feet. That's my excuse and I'm sticking with it. But I thought that at home actually when I first got the clubs, I put the club behind a ball. The head is absolutely tiny, so that shank or the hosel of the club, proximity of that from the centre of the face isn't all that much. And if you're somebody who maybe has a pattern of heel strikes, the FG2 or V6 might be one to give a miss. The C300 forward shot, well, that was just goddamn awful to be honest. Big hook left. My tendency when I used to play a lot of golf was to hook it left. And it's reared its ugly head. It was only a matter of time. You can't hit every ball straight, Ryan. We all know there's nothing worse than a shot after a shank. And I must say, when I put the FG Tour down behind the ball, I was a little bit worried about where that hosel was in relation to the ball. So again, unless you're an extremely proficient ball striker, which I'd probably edge into that category to be honest, but even for me, that is just a little bit too small back behind the ball. And this is a 7-iron, so the heads are probably going to get slightly smaller as we move towards the 6 and the 5 and the 4. But if you're a bit of a hellraiser and you fancy the challenge of sitting that behind the ball and hitting it sweet every time, go for it, because it does look really nice. It's just a bit too small. I'm not sure why it's that small. I'm not seeing any real performance characteristics that warrant the head to be that small. One of the other reasons why I think a lot of people are going to prefer the C300 is because behind the ball it's just as pleasing. You're not losing anything for the fact that it's just that little bit bigger. I don't know what it is, maybe 5-10% bigger than the FG Tour, but the profile is pretty much exactly the same, so it looks great behind the ball. You're not losing anything because it's that little bit bigger. Now, as I've said, you're probably not going to see, or at least I'm not seeing that much of a difference in distance out here on the golf course, but potentially you would see a little bit more of a difference if you're in a closed environment, in a simulator or possibly a driving range. Because the C300 has two advantages over the FG Tour distance wise. Firstly, loft, which is arguably the most important of the two. Got 35 degrees in the FG Tour, which is rare these days. Companies are usually all about distance, and they're somewhat tricking the retailer into believing that they're actually hitting the ball further by sort of cranking the lofts down. We've even seen them down towards 29, I believe. We all know who that was. But it's nice to see 35 degrees. That's going to appeal to maybe the slightly longer hitters out there that maybe don't want the ball coming off so hot on all of their irons, and it makes it maybe a little bit easier to sort of not be carrying like 25 wedges to try and fill all the gaps once you get down towards that part of the bag. And the second is these little polymer inserts, which, according to Wilson, we've got to trust what they're saying, increases face deflection, sounds fancy, by somewhere in the region of about 27%. Now this face deflection, I'm assuming, works on a similar basis to the trampoline effect that we had in drivers, and we all know that that got banned. So how far can you take this face deflection? It'll be quite interesting to see. So again, test environment, C300 is probably going to go further for most people, purely based on loft and then this face deflection. You've just got to love weather forecasts, haven't you? All week, 0% chance of rain. Woke up this morning at 5:20, looked at the weather app, most accurate app available apparently, 0% chance. We just had about 20 minutes there, 25 minutes of fairly persistent rains, and it was quite obvious as well. There was a huge band of black cloud came over, so not quite sure how that escaped the satellites. Just going back to what the clubs look like behind the ball, the C300, yep, that's the bigger of the two. And there is a little bit, or there seems to be a little bit more offset, but not to the point where it would cause any distraction for somebody who's maybe fearing the ball going a little bit left. Me. And the FG Tour as well. Tiny little bit of offset there as well, just for a little bit of help. They needed to put that there as well, to be honest, because if they took that offset away, quite frightened the living daylights, even out Ben Hogan. So to conclude, impressed again with Wilson's product. In my honest opinion, I'm not quite sure who is going to go for the V6 other than people who are maybe really interested in the aesthetic of the club in their bags. And there are people like that out there. I'm not necessarily one of them, but I can see the appeal of having a nice looking set of clubs in your bag. Again, that's not to say that the C300 isn't a good looking club, and some people may even prefer the C300. Again, it looks a little bit like the Callaway Apex range, so it's not ugly by any means. Sound wise from the head, I couldn't detect any real difference at all from the shots that I've hit on the golf course. There might be a slightly different sound indoors, you might be able to pick up on the acoustics a little bit more, but out here on the moor both sounded pretty much identical. Performance wise, again, I think it was difficult to distinguish between the two. Certainly distance, I didn't see any great difference between the two clubs, but I dare say in a closed environment you're going to find that the C300 is more than likely going to go further due to having 2 degrees less loft and having this sort of face technology where in effect it's basically like a trampoline effect taking place, so I'd expect the ball speeds to be maybe slightly higher off the face. But as always, it's probably best to get down to your local pro and test these golf clubs out and see which one you prefer. Again, I think the FG Tour is going to lure people in with its sexy looks, but then I think it's going to put you off when you put it behind the ball because it's beautiful, but it is very, very small. C300 looks nice on the shelf, not as nice, but it's not going to lure you in and sort of deceive you. When you put it down on the ground, oh, it's nice looking, and there's actually some head there, and it looks as though there's a little bit more forgiveness. Thanks for watching the video, really hope you've enjoyed it. Shout out goes to Aslan Golf, the link for their website is in the description. They are stocking both of these irons, so if you fancy treating yourself, you can follow the link in the description. Please subscribe to the channel, like it if you liked it, share it if you know a friend who will enjoy it. I'll see you all again soon, take care.